Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Inno Grove Women in Tech Workshop, Finding Professional Growth and Success at Work. I'm Kristin Berkery, and I'm looking forward to meeting our panelists and hearing their career stories. If you have a question during the event, please ask it in the Zoom chat. I will be watching it throughout the event and collecting the questions. And then stay with us, and toward the end of the event, I will share your questions with the panelists. First, everyone who registered for this event is automatically entered into a drawing for a paperback copy of this book, The Female Entrepreneur's Playbook. This is a brand new book that's out in paperback and on Kindle on Amazon. And I think you'll find the stories inspiring. It's featuring the stories of more than 20 different women in their careers, how they overcame challenges, that kind of thing. After the event, I will use a random number generator to pick the winner, and then I will notify the winner privately. So let's meet our panelists. Brandy Bolden has worked in both high-tech and low-tech industries, but her focus has always been on the human side of operations. She's been at SMUD for 18 years, and she now serves as the utility's Chief Customer Officer, which means she works on creating strategies that improve quality of life for both SMUD customers and the employees who work for her. Welcome, Brandy.
Hi, thank you. So glad to be here.
Mariah Lichtenstern is a connector. She's always growing her network of talented and enlightening people in technology, entertainment, and venture capital. An alumna of UC Berkeley, USC, and UCLA, she serves as an advisor for a number of programs focused on diversity. Mariah is also a founding member of DiverseCity Ventures in Sacramento, which seeks to fund startups that are led by diverse teams. Thank you for joining us, Mariah.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Carolyn Peer has dedicated her career to helping organizations identify employee talents and then encourage those employees to become more engaged in their roles. Her efforts have resulted in greater efficiencies and, more importantly, happier employees that feel empowered. Her company, Humaxa, designs technology to help remote and in-person teams stay connected and productive. We're happy to have you with us today, Carolyn. So,
thank you.
Carolyn, let's start with you first.
Okay.
Tell us more about yourself and your career path.
Sure. So my academic background is in cognitive neuroscience and instructional technology. And frankly, I got into that because I started off my academic career as a double major in physics and art. And I was very quickly told by both departments that I couldn't do that. You could either do physics or you could do art, but you couldn't do both. And I said, we'll see about that. and ended up doing both for the first year, and then moved into cognitive neuroscience because it seemed like a way to kind of combine those two things. I know that seems very strange, but there was just enough sort of artistic creativity in trying to develop simulations that really mimicked what people do in order to figure out this intersection of what people can do best and what machines can do best. And that ended up turning into a project where I developed a simulation for how to mimic how people learn, but on a machine. And this was back before it was really a popular thing. I ended up, my first job straight out of grad school was working for a defense contractor. I developed training simulations for people that were going into the Navy. And then ended up taking that same kind of learning, how do you develop training simulations, and ended up working at a number of tech startups, and ended up at one in particular called ProBusiness. And when I got there, it was a very small company. We grew the company, it was acquired. And then I ended up going to work for a global Fortune 250 company, which is completely the opposite of a small startup, but doing something very similar, and just sort of learning along the way. So I would say my career path has been kind of a circuitous path that went from here to here with this sort of underlying theme of what does it take for people to learn and engage and perform the best they can, and how is it possible to use technology to enhance that and so that people can use machines for things that machines are good for, and then machines can use things that people are good for, really marrying them up to get the best of both worlds.
Have you encountered challenges in your career path regarding being a woman? Have you typically been, the minority in the group among a lot of men?
Yes, always. It's a little hard to avoid when you've been in science and technology your entire career. Now that's changing, which is great. It seems like more and more women are becoming interested and staying in the science and mathematics and technology fields. Back when I started, it was much more uncommon. So there were a lot of challenges around how do you work with a group of 15 people and there's 14 men and 1 woman and you're the 1 woman. That's kind of a trial by fire, I think. That's been
Since
challenging.
you mentioned that times are changing, have you been able to mentor younger women in roles like yours?
Absolutely. I feel that what I try to do is be the mentor I wish I had had. Which of course is, kind of a way of sort of paying it forward, I guess you could say. And a lot of people have helped me. For whatever reason, a lot of the people that have helped me have been men, which, I'm very grateful for. I would have loved to have the kind of the woman perspective as well. And so I'm hoping that as I can find ways to give back to others who are coming through the ranks, that I can be that female mentor that I wish I'd had.
Have you also juggled a family or other things outside of your career that, has made it a little bit more complicated?
Well, I suppose you could say my life has been a little more complicated. It's, I think that there's a lot of women out there that sort of de facto standard is to take on the sort of caregiving role. Not that it should be, it just for whatever reason seems to happen that way. I'm married, but I don't have kids, but I've had for the last 15 years have been the primary caregivers for my parents. I have 2 brothers, but I was really the person who took care of everything and doing that in a very challenging environment. My mom was very sick for a long time, and that was challenging. But then also trying to run a company, it's very challenging. And when you're with peers that don't have that obligation, sometimes it's hard to hard to have them walk a mile in your shoes. Again, I do think that's changing, though. I think there's a lot more that's available, even for men. For example, having paternity leave. That's not something that was always around. Now that's becoming much more prevalent, which is a really good sign. But yeah, there's always challenges there.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm.
Mariah, can you tell us some about yourself and your career path?
I think much like Carolyn, mine has been a bit meandering. I'll say that for a woman who identifies as a woman in tech, primarily now, and in finance, I guess they're both male-dominated industries. The statistics are out there about the number of women represented in venture capital. Black women are less than 1% of venture capitalists. I've also been, the only, but I'm really glad to see that there are more women that are having the courage to step up and not only remain in industries, even when there is like pushback and resistance. Women that are being persistent, but also, that are, questioning some of the status quo, because I think we've kind of got away from the advocacy. just thinking we've made it this far and there's not more work to do. So I would say that is kind of like at the foundation of my career path. When I was an undergrad, I worked all through high school, worked through, college. And so I kind of don't know like where my career really began, but I was president of Future Business Leaders of America in high school, and I took what tech classes I could get, but I didn't really have a concept of that being a career path for me. I didn't have examples of that. I took statistics and AP statistics and physics in high school, but I didn't know what an engineer was. I didn't know what a computer scientist was. My counselor wasn't directing me in that path. I was always very strong in English. And so, I figured I'd be a professor or something like that, maybe a teacher, something in that field. When I arrived at Cal, I would say, I went to UC Berkeley in the Bay Area where I was born. And I would say I was fortunate because that's kind of like the heart of Silicon Valley, and it was in the middle of the dot-com boom and bust, actually. But what was happening when I was there is there was a couple of things. We were laying fiber optics and transitioning to like digital in the film industry. So digital projection, digital, camcorders and stuff. And we were right just at the beginning. And so, even though I didn't have a computer at home, the first couple of years of college, I'd have to go to the computer lab. When I would go to my friends' houses, they were all burning music on Napster. And I saw that massive disruption that was happening in the music industry. And my major at that time, I was a rhetoric major, rhetoric of narrative and the image. And I minored in ethnic and Pan-African studies and English. And so I kind of like developed this thesis around representations of people of color in the media, and mainstream hip hop is modern day minstrelsy. And if you know anything about the history of Blackface minstrelsy, it's kind of around that, wax poetic about it. But, I was really interested in the disruption to the music industry, because what I recognize is that we really, as people of color in this country, have not controlled or owned our image, the way that we're portrayed. And the way that we're portrayed impacts not only how others see us, but how we see ourselves. And I'm still growing up listening to Public Enemy and MC Lyte and Queen Latifah and JJ Fad, and that whole dynamic and how it shifted when we got into like gangster rap. And Clear Channel determines what gets played, right? It's not us having ownership of it. So I saw technology as a way for us to create what I called substreams of distribution. And I was really interested in how, entrepreneurship could also solve for some of the economic inequality that I thought were the underpinnings of injustice in society. And I was very much the march in the street before there was a hashtag type of activist, which is, what UC Berkeley is probably known for, even though that's not the majority, it's like the noisiest ones, right? And so with that, when I met my now husband, he was here from Botswana on scholarship for production. And I started working with him and his friends and producing their movies. And I really enjoyed that. I started a business with a boutique production company. And I was in e-commerce, before its time. And I just really, really like the business side of things, like kind of being behind the scene, but really empowering artists and giving them voice and platform. But what I saw is that we had, there were still problems with access to capital and distribution. And so I was looking at the future with laying the fiber optics and whatnot, opening up these greater opportunities, both in, music and the film industry, and opportunities for us to own our cultural product and to have, more economic freedom and in entrepreneurship. So that was kind of like my entryway into, the path that I'm on now. And I recognize that I always wanted to be involved in capital formation. But when I was in grad school, I started off at USC for motion picture producing, and then I transferred over to UCLA. And to help pay my way, I got into the finance industry where I was originating mortgages, and I got securities license and insurance license. And so in the securities licensing, I had to read securities laws. And it was like an eye opener because, films are securities, right? Anytime you're raising capital, you're basically issuing securities. And I recognize that, number one, a lot of filmmakers were raising money illegally and didn't even know it and couldn't afford a securities attorney if they could find one, which was hard to do post Enron. But I also recognize that there were laws that were written that really excluded many Americans from investing in startups and from having access to raise capital, because you could only raise within your network before the Jobs Act. So fast forward, I ended up, much like Carolyn, being involved with family caregiving. I fostered nephews. My mother was a nurse that retired from UC Davis and was chronically ill. And I ended up helping to care for her at the end of her life. I've lost both my parents, 2 siblings. I'm the baby of 8. So a lot of that with my mother in particular, I was her only surviving child. So a lot of that fell on me. And after she passed away, it kind of like liberated me, like, okay, now I can get back on track with my career. But during that time, I did media and technology consulting for small and medium businesses. So I would do, websites and mobile apps and integrations and that kind of stuff. So I always kind of stayed in technology and media. And then I went out and got into, startups and started recognizing that there were all these, systemic issues that were still in play after all these years. And so I had, the good fortune of getting into a community of venture capitalists through the Kauffman Fellow Society, met some mentors, got a toe in the door, went through the Founder Institute and ended up launching a chapter here. Carolyn came through that. She also was an entrepreneur in residence. And so she really does pay it forward. I became an Aspen Tech Policy Hub Fellow in Q1 2020 to address some of the systemic issues around the funding gap for women and underrepresented people of color in particular. And it really affects most Americans that fall outside of that accredited investor, network, high net worth network. But of course, it disproportionately impacts women and people of color. So that's just kind of been like a summary of, how my career pathway has moved. I've always wanted to be in the position that I'm in now, but certainly there are unique barriers to entry that women face in this industry.
That's such an amazing story, how you navigated through all that. I find that fascinating. And lots of times it is, I can relate in my own career where you just happen to find, oh, there's a need for this. Okay, let's follow that and see where it takes me. So that's, thank you so much for sharing that. That's fascinating. So our third panelist, Brandy, tell us about yourself and your career path.
Wow. So first I have to say, just great hearing from both Carolyn and Mariah. I mean, Mariah, you took me back with Napster, burning CDs. I just had all types of flashbacks. And it just so happens that during those days, I was actually living in the Bay Area, working at the time, doing the very same thing, burning CDs with Napster. So I was probably creating the disruption in the music industry. My fault. So anyways, so, my career path, I like to really call it a journey because I don't know that I ever had a clear kind of idea on, that's definitely what I wanted to, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to end up doing. I started working very, very young. I think I might've been 14 when I got my first job down at the local, candy store down in what's old Sacramento. And I just like the idea of having money in my pocket and not having to, beg my parents for, can I borrow $5? Can I do this? Can I do that? And it gave me just a real sense of independence. And I quickly learned that the $5.25 I was making an hour, I could do better, right? So I actually got a job working for Wells Fargo Bank as a teller when I was 15 years old. I had a work permit in hand and I said, I got a work permit. They signed off. I think I can do this. And so went in, got a job, and kind of went from there. I mean, at $8 an hour when you're in high school, you're doing big things. So I just thought that was the end all to be all. So I come from a family, both my parents worked really hard. And so that's all I ever knew was that, have a job, take care of yourself, be able to be independent, to be on your own, to take care of yourself and that type of thing. Went to college at UC Davis, majored in sociology, which was like the 6th or 7th or 8th pick of my changing my major while I was there. I had amassed so many classes. At one point I said, oh, looks like I'll be getting a major in sociology with a minor in African American studies. So let's do it, So I never thought in a million years I would actually use my degree, but I'll get back to that in a second. But again, graduated from school. I was working at Wells Fargo the entire time, all the way through college, and ended up kind of falling into a role with Wells Fargo in their ATM support area. And that's really where I really started to kind of cut my teeth on technology and technology roles. And so I went there and I was basically in charge of troubleshooting ATMs that would fail for a number of reasons, and started to really kind of gain interest in just how that all worked. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then I actually got a really great opportunity to go work for Intel in one of their recent college graduate programs, which I didn't know anything about. I had heard about it from one of my relatives who had worked at Intel in the Bay, and she said, "Hey, you know, you should go for this." And I said, "Why not?" So I joined Intel right after they had implemented one of their major CIS systems. And I got really on the ground floor of learning this CIS system, and really came to know kind of how it worked inside and out, as a matter of fact. And worked there for a couple of years. I actually ended up moving to the Bay Area with what was then the Intel Online Services, which was their venture into data site hosting, so in data centers. During the .com boom and subsequent bust. So I was in the Bay Area at the time and got caught up in the .com bust. And so, as you might imagine, you know, Intel's a very great employer, but they do make shifts. And so I found myself after 4.5 years there looking for a role, which I actually ended up scoring like maybe a month in, a month out. With the Clorox company, who was at the time implementing this very same CIS software. So seeing that I knew that really well, I started as a lead business analyst over there and worked for that company for a couple of years, which was very interesting, making the transition from semiconductors to consumer goods. Completely different business, but the thread that they shared was the technology that enabled both businesses to be successful. I actually worked there for a couple of years through their implementation and go live, and then decided, oh, I think I want to come back to Sacramento because this is where my family is. This is home. And so I said, you know, I remember I was actually taking the train. I was on Amtrak back and forth commuting from Sacramento to the Bay Area at the time because I had moved back, but still was working with Clorox. And we were all kind of, that's when you actually used to read the paper to look for jobs. Remember those days? Like you open it up and like, oh, what's happening? You know, people are circling jobs because we're all sick of riding the train every day and whatnot. So I looked at, you know, there's a job at SMUD and I go, well, I don't know anything about utilities, but you know, what the heck? So I applied for a position there and actually got the position. And when I started there, as you might guess, what was the common thread? This same CIS system had been implemented at SMUD the year before, and they needed process improvement analysts to work on how to really re-engineer business processes around this new system and this new capability. So that's where my journey into the utility space began 18 years ago. I never thought in a million years I would be with one place for 18 years, but I just fell in love with the company and the people and the support system, and I learned so much. The interesting thing about utilities is when I first started, you know, definitely was not the same company it is today. If anything, we're now a technology company that happens to be a utility, right? There's so much of what we do that's integrated into technology. And it enables the very way we get electricity today. So, and how we service our customers and how we serve our community. So I think if anything, you know, technology has definitely been the common thread. And like I had mentioned before, you know, being, you know, and working my way up in and around the company, I've held a variety of roles from, you know, entry-level analyst to, you know, I ran the project management office. I've worked on various different projects. Ran operations, and now as chief customer officer. I'd say I am now probably at the point where I am definitely using my sociology degree more than I ever thought I would before. Understanding people, systems, processes. These were all the things that I never thought I would really, you don't consciously tap into it, but it just kind of happens organically. So in any case, that's a little bit about me and what I like to call my career journey, because it definitely wasn't a straight line, but it's interesting in looking back, just the common thread that exists between all the roles that I've had.
The journey is fascinating to me because everybody seems to have a different one. Thank you for sharing that. So I have some questions that I would love to ask our panelists. And you are all welcome. We can give this a shot. If you want to jump in and answer a question, we can give that a shot. Or if everybody's shy today, I'll call out names and you can jump in. Did you ever leave a job because of how you were treated? And how did you deal with that? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
How about we should have left a job because of how we were treated and we didn't, because we had bills to pay. And
That part.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that is a real factor in people being able to leave a job or to have, to stay. Sorry, I kind of commandeered that because I think a lot of times say, did you leave a job because of how you were treated? That's in some cases, a luxury of, wow, people are actually able to leave a job. I mean, what about their bills? How do they, how do you deal with all that?
I completely agree.
Yeah, I had a situation where I interviewed with the senior executive committee of a technology company, all men. And the interview was actually more like a presentation to the executive committee. Everything went great. And the hiring manager was looking at one of the senior execs. The senior exec said to him, "Wow, that was a great presentation." And then looked at me and said, "She's not going to go and get pregnant now, is she?" And I think my jaw dropped. And the hiring manager, who I really liked, I really wanted this job, I really needed it, his eyes just went whoop, got about 5 sizes bigger than they normally were. And I thought about, gosh, I really wish that I'd had a way to somehow express how that made people feel, how it made me feel. And I'm sure there's other people who fell into those same shoes. I took the job. I had to. I needed it. It was, I mean, I didn't stay there that long, and I did really like the hiring manager, but it was tough. I don't think a man would have gotten that same reaction. Oh, your wife's not going to go have a baby. Like, nobody would say that. Nobody would say that. Looking back at it, I'm kind of embarrassed. I think I probably should, I wish I had done something different, but the reality was I needed the job. I needed the money. So that's what happened.
Yeah. Wow. What a way to kick off a job too. To the other ladies, have you either wanted to leave a job because of how you were treated or successfully left it?
I agree with Carolyn in that I definitely have stayed in roles and kept contracts where I was looking for the exit, but, post Great Recession, I think a lot of us experience just having to do what you have to do. And, not all of us have luxuries to fall back on. But at the start of my career, I remember actually really, really loving a job that I was in, but I was really underpaid and I didn't know how to negotiate. I didn't really have like a mentor. I was coming fresh out of high school, my first full-time job. And I didn't really know what the pay rate was. There wasn't like Glassdoor and all these, sites back then. And so even though it was above minimum wage, which I thought was great, it was below, what I could have been paid elsewhere. So I left partly because of that, and also because of the person that I was introduced to get like my foot in the door. We ended up like carpooling, and he was an executive in the, I don't know if I even told the story publicly, but he was I supported like 5 executives in this company in Silicon Valley. And I just remember one day in particular where I was making copies and he came up behind me and he just put his hands on my waist. And I kind of had like that freeze. You know how you have the, fight, flight, freeze? I just froze. And I was just so uncomfortable. And I'm like stuck carpooling with this guy, who's definitely, if it was between me or him, I'm the one that's going, right? And so between that and the pay and the fact that I was commuting from that point between Hayward, the Peninsula and UC Berkeley on a daily basis, once I transitioned from the summer full-time to part-time in college, I just, went and found a higher paying, actually, I think I went to a lower paying retail job before I found a higher paying job as a supervisor. So I definitely left because of being underpaid and feeling sexually harassed.
That's yeah, that's an incredibly difficult situation to be in. Let's see, I have another question that I am also personally interested in, and I hope other people can benefit from. What self-care practices are most important to you?
I'll jump on that one. A lot of folks who know me know that I have to work out. I must exercise as not only something that keeps me mentally engaged, physically engaged, but just it really is time for me to just focus my mind and energy on something else. And it really is a fantastic stress reliever. I get out of a meeting that is, maybe didn't go so well. I'll go out in the garage and pull up a couple of weights and just go at it or, put on my running shoes and take off just because it's a great release. And, I think for a lot of years, I dealt with a level of stress that I didn't know that I had. It was just kind of internal. And, you just kind of keep it bottled up and you just kind of go at 1,000,000 miles an hour and you take care of you're taking care of things at work and you're taking care of things at home. And you're taking care of just 1,000,000 things. And I said, something's going to give. And the last thing I wanted to do was my body to knock me on the shoulder and say, hey, we're going to go sit down because you're not doing it for yourself. So I'm going to sit you down. And I think that really, really came at a point where, I think, Mariah, you mentioned it, my mother was ill for about 2.5 years and then passed away in 2016. And I know that the weight that I carried for that, during that time and after was just so much. I just felt, physically just fatigued. And so I really kind of took to exercising more and taking care of myself and making sure that, I took that time out, which was really important for me, long term. So
I read a report that said that founders should watch at least one movie per month. So I 100% agree. There's actually like really sound science around, the importance of working out and burning off those stress hormones, even in terms of, tension and pain and all of that. So like I told you, I felt good. I wasn't going to feel guilty because I got some of my steps in, and I've got my, I did two circles, 2 rounds today. And I read that it's actually better to do 3 short breaks throughout the day than like one hour-long walk. It's better to even do like 5-10 minute breaks if there's several of them. So I've been more intentional about that. But the other thing for me is just, getting into that right brain and, movies, getting into someone else's story, or, coloring with my daughter. And we definitely just going back to kind of the exercise, doing the dance parties. But I think just finding those things that really, feed your soul, that make life worth living, that giving yourself permission. And I find that I'm more productive when I allow myself to refresh and unplug. And sometimes we forget that because the to-do list is just piling up, and we feel like so obligated to everyone else. But at the end of the day, one of the leaders that I admire in our ecosystem says, they will replace you. You are replaceable. Even the most profound people in the world are replaceable. The world goes on without you. But how much more of an impact can you have if you preserve yourself? And so I try to eat healthy, eat food that's gonna, keep me healthy and not like tear me down. I try not to drink alcohol. I try to drink my water. I've got my collagen, So I just try to, take care of, mind, body, soul, listen to the music. I have my hi-fi playlist. I have my gospel rap playlist. I got my old school playlist. My daughter and I have our, kid-friendly playlist. So just doing all those things to, to feed the soul and the body and the mind, for sure.
I think one of the things that I've noticed both in myself and also actually looking at the data in our software, because it does ask about stress and how people relieve stress and then makes recommendations based on what it thinks will help people. And what I've noticed is it's really, really different for each individual person what works to, for some people, it's a mindfulness exercise. Just having that little reminder, hey, let's do roller coaster breathing or something like that. We actually put that into our software because it was requested that much. Half my team, when I said we're going to put mindfulness exercises into our software, they're like, oh, that's so funny. They thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. And I said, well, what do you do? They're like, oh, well, we play video games. It was okay. It was my turn to laugh. Like, really? You're going to go like do some shoot 'em up video game? If that's what it takes to de-stress, I mean, it's definitely different for each and every individual person. And just that vastness of all the possible things to take a break, take a moment, refocus, and then get going on what you're doing. It's amazing how many different things that are out there that work differently for different people. It's great.
Sports, boy, when they did that NBA
Yep.
bubble, that brought some normalcy to our home.
True crime. Seriously, true crime. I mean, it sounds bizarre, but that is a de-stressor for me. Everybody else can laugh. It's true.
Well, I don't feel so bad because I'm like hooked on Datelines.
Dateline, exactly. 48 hours, Dateline. What can I say? I guess their lives are so chaotic that mine seems very calm and normal, even when it's really going badly.
That is so true. All it takes is listening to a podcast like that or watching a show like that, and I think, wow, my life is pretty darn good. I want to ask a little bit about mentorship. When you have, at a time in your career, when you have sought out a mentor or some kind of guidance, who did you ask? How did you ask for that?
I was in a leadership program. Gosh, this has been about 10 years ago. The Nehemiah Emerging Leaders program here in Sacramento, which was a fantastic experience. But I think that was really kind of the first time I really thought about mentorship. And it's through that program, you're actually kind of pointed or given some mentors or some folks around you to support you, and you can seek them out and whatnot. And that's the first time I think I ever really kind of formalized a mentorship relationship with someone. But it really kind of opened my eyes to just the many folks who have mentored me, both in front and behind the scenes, my career. And it always surprises me when as I guess moved up the ladder or whatnot, just some of the folks that were there kind of pushing me and rooting for me behind the scenes. Like, it's really about the folks that will advocate for you when you're not in the room. And sometimes you don't know who they are. But I am a firm believer in mentorship. One of my biggest mentors or someone I definitely consider as mentor and a friend was my former boss, who I worked for about 10 years. And that's someone who connected with me kind of early on in my career and just kind of watched me, looked out, provided me the much needed advice and sometimes the much needed push, and saw me in ways that I don't know that I saw myself at times. And so I think that's very helpful. It's instrumental, it's necessary, and it's not something that we always know how to ask for, I think, at times. And so, I guess if there was anything I would say around mentorship is, definitely seek them out. Allow yourself to be sought out as one. You never know, everyone has something to offer. And if, the more that you can give, I think it's more fulfilling on the back end. So, yeah.
I would say, that first full-time job that I mentioned earlier, there was a woman VP, and she was very much like a mentor to me. We met every Monday and Friday. She was very kind. I remember when I left, she wrote me this wonderful letter of recommendation, and I'm sure it just really got me across the finish line. in, you know, the next key position that I had. So I definitely consider her, you know, as a role model. I think Carolyn had mentioned like that for her, a lot of her mentors have been men. And I would say that that's also true of me. I remember going into a mentorship program in grad school through, it was called Project Involved through Film Independent. And so I was paired with Tom Ortenberg, who is the president of releasing and acquisition at Lionsgate Films. And if anyone's familiar with the Tyler Perry story, he was like that executive that, you know, negotiated Tyler Perry's deal and was, you know, didn't believe that he had an audience and went to the movies. And he was like, because y'all don't put anything in the theaters that my audience wants to see. So we all know where that went. And Tom was just, you know, brilliant. He's definitely picked a number of Academy Award-winning films. He, you know, was very gracious and, you know, having the lunch meetings with me and giving me advice that I've carried with me, brought me into meetings and allowed me to participate. And, you know, even, you know, when there was pushback against, you know, me being there, you know, because I was looked at, you know, as a threat in a sense and as a token in another sense. You know, DEI in 2002 was like, you know, there was a lot of programs and not a lot of change. You know, just, I would say from that era, you know, I would say post-affirmative action in California to, you know, more recently. There's been a lot of research and findings, but still just a lot of misunderstanding what it really means and some just blockage to it until like our hearts just opened up with George Floyd, seemingly. But so like, you know, he was definitely a mentor, but I found like with him and other mentors, like I had a wonderful mentor through SCORE. But, you know, these are white men and their lived experiences are different than my experiences as a Black woman, you know, not only as a woman, not only as a Black person, but at the intersectionality of both. And so I feel like, you know, even with their best intentions, there were some gaps there and there were probably some, you know, I think like, you know, Tom used to say like, I never had a mentor, but I'm like, but everyone's your mentor. Like there's all kinds of white men around you that are lifting you up. And for me, it's like, you think that I have some advantage because I'm in this, you know, diversity program, but it's not translating to what you think the advantage is. You know, like, where's the job? Where's the, you know, it's not happening like you think it is. And so there was that, but there were also, you know, some key women. And one of the women that I just hold dear, and I've mentioned her so many times that her ears are probably burned, but Rusty Dornan, who was a VP of the Kauffman Fellows Academy while I was enrolled back in 2005. And she really encouraged me to apply to the Kauffman Fellow Society. And she not only did that, but she really advocated for my application to where, you know, there's an assistant in the Kauffman Fellows Academy. And, you know, he and I became friends. And he told me one day, he was like, Mariah, I don't know what you did to Rusty, but she's always got your name in her mouth. She's like, you remember Mariah? Think of Mariah. Have you looked at Mariah's application? So I think what Brandy was saying about people talking about you when you're not in the room, there's been, you know, a few key women like that. And, you know, I think of here locally, Cheryl Benninga. Just love the work that she's doing at Fourth Wave and, you know, the example that she has been as a venture capitalist spinning out of Intel Capital. So I think there's formal and informal mentors. And for women, we really have to find sometimes those informal mentors and role models. And I will say this one last thing. I feel very blessed and fortunate because I think we all need mentors at different stages throughout our life. And so recently I joined the National Venture Capitalist Association's Venture Forward program, and they, you know, granted me a scholarship into VC University that includes a mentorship program. And I have been looking for venture capital mentors, like formal mentorship, for so long. Like there's informal, but it's just really wonderful that I have a peer mentor now, and then a longstanding mentor, and just that camaraderie and that safe place. I feel really privileged to have that, especially at this point in my life.
If I can jump in too on this, I think one thing that we've kind of sort of danced around a little bit is there's a huge difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And I personally did not understand that for a really long time, where, you know, I was doing something and I would ask for help, and maybe I would be fortunate enough to have a mentor who would help me to do that. But when it came to career growth, especially, the importance of having a sponsor. So if we can just talk about the difference, a mentor is going to help you do things, maybe help you with your immediate situation, give you suggestions, you know, point you to resources, give you feedback, et cetera. having a sponsor is someone who's going to get out there and stick their neck out for you. If they're willing to get behind you and say, hey, Carolyn would be really good in this position, I would bet everything in the world on that, including my reputation. That is a huge commitment, and it's much harder to get, and yet so powerful. And it takes a long time to foster that level of trust, because once you have a sponsor who sticks your neck out for you like that, and if they have to know for sure that it's not going to come back and bite them. And I think the importance, what I've realized over time, is the importance of fostering those relationships so that you can kind of take your mentors and cultivate them, so that hopefully you can get a sponsor who really will stick their neck out for you 100% and stake their reputation on it. It's huge, absolutely huge. So yeah, I would just encourage everyone to kind of keep that in mind too, because I certainly didn't realize that until I needed someone to do that, and realized, I've had some really good mentors. I'm not sure if I've got a great sponsor in that one situation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm glad you shared that distinction, because that is there is a big difference there. And really, I tend to just think of looking for mentors.
Sure.
Hey, why not put it all out there and look for a sponsor too? I mean, you got to shoot for the stars.
Or maybe it's mentor to sponsor. I mean, I think there's a
Right.
time element, because then, there's a level of trust you have to have with that mentor. The mentor has in you that they know 100% you are not going to let them down, because they're putting their own career and their own reputation on the line for you. It's a big deal. Yeah.
That's a great point, Carolyn. And I think if you're super lucky, you'll have them both in the same person. a mentor that can sponsor you at any point. So no, absolutely. Great point.
I got a really good question here from the audience. Do any of you have a mantra or a saying that you live by that helps you get through the tough times or to stay positive?
So do our favorite rap songs count? Like when you just get into it and do your Sasha Fierce kind of like, okay, no, I will say this, I'm a woman of faith. And so there's several that I can just pull straight from the Bible, and I'm interfaith. So I'm not judging anybody for having my own, but I definitely grew up with things like, I will never, be left or forsaken. Some people trust in horses, some people trust in chariots. I will trust in God. There's so many things I stand on. I think one of the ones that I fall back on the most is, whatever things are good, whatever things are positive, whatever things are of good report, think on these things, and the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will be with you. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. But, I always draw from that. And then, I definitely, Carolyn mentioned meditations. I get into the, the different brain waves, the theta waves. I get into guided meditation. I definitely recognize whether it's just a mood, or if it's, just being tired, or if it's just been a rough day or whatever, that, I need to go and feed my psyche, and recalibrate. I think it's constant recalibration, especially when you're in, when you face adversities, and when you're in, when you're blazing new trails. I think it's really, really important to nourish and encourage yourself.
Absolutely. I agree. You got so much more profound. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind once I had children and a career, it was, just keep swimming, just keep swimming.
I'll jump in, and I'm not sure this is exactly a mantra, but when you become an entrepreneur, you get told no hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times for everything from investment to, won't you, try our software, to, you name it. You get told no hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's extremely difficult to maintain your sanity in that. And I know for me, even before becoming an entrepreneur, I was told no a lot. The example of, oh no, you can't be a physics and an art major. I'm like, we'll see about that. So that was my mantra. I was like, oh, you're gonna tell me no? Yeah, we'll see about that. I'm going to prove you wrong. And it's more like a joke, but it also helps me get over the hundreds and hundreds of people that say no. It's like, huh, yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that.
Yeah, I have to admit that having someone underestimate me has actually been one of the biggest motivators in my career. I did not anticipate that, but it often ends up that way. I have to say, I think my mantra that I live by, and it's more of a gut thing, is just success is the best revenge. You know, if someone underestimates me or undermines me in some way, it's like, I'll be successful in spite of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't let anybody tell you no. The only person who can tell you no is yourself.
Well, we are coming to the end of our time here. So I want to thank our panelists so much. This was amazing. I feel so energized and ready to go do something big. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I hope we can do something like this again together. I would love to do that. And I also want to thank everyone who attended today in the audience. You guys are fantastic. We couldn't have done it without you. And if you would like to know about future InnoGrove events, you can check out innogrove.com, or you can also, I encourage you to follow InnoGrove on Meetup, and that's where the events get posted. Feel free to connect with all of us on LinkedIn. We love it. We love connecting with people and hearing from all of you. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kristin,
Awesome.
and thank you, SMUD and InnoGrove and City of Elk Grove.
Yes.